This is a meeting of the Wellington Capital Improvement Program Committee. It's February 1st, 2022 at 6:30 p.m. And the first item on our agenda is present to speak. And I will just ask everyone if there is someone from the public who'd like to speak, please raise your hand or speak into your microphone so I know. I don't see anyone. All right, I guess we can move on. Approval of minutes, we're going to skip that because we don't have the minutes to approve. And plan discussion of year one, and I will let Donna take it from here. I'll stop sharing my. Donna, is your microphone working? I think you're muted. Yeah, you're muted.
Unmute. Okay, am I unmuted?
Yep, you're unmuted now.
Okay, all right. So, Christina, would you like to take it from here?
Sure.
And
Well,
go through.
So this is just like a recap, I guess, of where we left off last week, where, and I guess you can't see my mouse, so I'm not going to point at things, but in column J is where the local funds is, and anything that's bolded is stuff that has already been committed. And it's at the very top there, it's mostly lease payments and the bond payment for the library. And then as you go down the list, it starts to be the things that are requested in this fiscal year, either for this fiscal year or for one of the out years. And what Donna and I have done is put things, if it should be for this year, into the local fund or the off budget column, and tried to put a fund source to it. So, and if you can scroll down a little bit, Donna. So, and we have it grouped by department. So you can see all the public works things, and then you can see all the EMS things, and then all the Board of Ed things, which there's a lot of. And then the school building construction, and then selectmen, recreation, and conservation and senior center, which the last two don't even have a single request for the all 5 years. So, but we should leave them on there because sometimes they do, and maybe next year they will. And then what we did was we tried to come up with a goal number, which I did a 10% increase over last year, which is this current year, that we spent local funds on, which was $645,000 roughly. And if you do the math, it works out to be 709 as a goal for this 22-23. And basically that's where we're at, with 80,000 of that coming out of the operating budget, 930, and then 283,000 coming out of the bond and lease repayment, and then another 345 going into the reserve fund. And then if you look at like specifically, we have 71,000 going into LoCIP. General.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure I understand something. Line 84, move to reserve fund, the 345,923. That is coming out of taxation, correct? That's intended to come out of the regular budget? Finance will be working on over the next 2 months.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Donna, maybe do you want to explain those, because I know you were working on the tables, and You can explain
Yes.
that.
Yes, so we have $71,000 coming out of LoSiP, 487,000 coming out of reserve, and 231,000 coming out of emergency services. So actually, emergency services is the fund source that I was able to complete today. And emergency services would be able to support all of the items that were asked for from the emergency, the EMS, both fire departments. Okay, so here's a tracing of it, starting with next year, $231,000 coming out for these projects, these 5 projects. And you see up here, the $231,000 we're starting with, estimated to start with 280,000. So we'll take out 231,000. I've always consistently used $145,000 for additions, and that is the recovery receipts less the administrative cost. So that's a pretty good net number for additions. Sometimes it's a little more, but 145,000, that's a good number. And so as you follow it down in the out years, then the next year you spend 70,000, put in the 145. Next year you spend 160,000, put in the 145. And so for the next 5 years, you have a healthy balance in emergency services reserve. And so here you can trace the projects. Here's the first year, 22, 23, first out year, year 2, here's a 70,000, and then 160,000, that's year 3, and year 4, 100,000, and year 5, 60,000. And these expenditures coming out are linked to this line right here, all the way across each of the 5 years. So here's the 231,000 year 1. I think you get the idea. Year 2, here's the 70,000, and the projects are up here in this pink grouping for emergency services. So that explains the spending from Fund 17 for all 5 years. Yes, Stephanie.
I just wanted to ask you a couple of things. One was, when you come to that 145 grand figure
Yes.
that's worked
Yes.
for you over the years and scientifically arrived at, do you,
Yes.
when you say recovery, what was that formula, and what is recovery? Recovery of what?
Mike could explain that.
Well,
Recovery
it's the
receipts.
revenue recovery is the general term used for it, but it's the ambulance billing.
Okay, thank you.
So that's the net of the ambulance building. And Donna, if I understood what you're saying is the gross comes to you, that number is minus of the administrative fee for the billing company, and it's minus of the paramedic payments, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Those 2 things, billing service
then-
and
Right, and so 145 is a safe net. It varies some year to year.
yeah, some years it's 160, but I always use
Yep.
145, and then you got a little wiggle room.
And has that changed very much since Medicare changed its rates? I mean, I'm just curious because we've seen a lot of, it feels like a lot, it's a half a million to run the ambulance service as far as the amount that's billed to the taxpayers, or that's, left to the taxpayers annually. So I'm just wondering, that's not likely to grow? That's still that's holding steady at 145? That formula,
Well,
Donna?
I don't
would it be
know.
all right to- Donna, would it be all right to ask Chief more about that? Because he was the
Yes,
informed us about what the changes were going to be in the billing, like billing for goals, things like that. So maybe he
Yep.
can help us. And he
perfect.
can also
Thank you,
tell us
Mike.
when that goes into effect.
All right, I don't know which way my camera's facing because I can't see it. So
Well, we can see you.
It's looking.
Okay,
it's
so
looking
perfect.
good.
I just
Yeah.
had no idea if you were looking at Ron or if you were looking at me, so. Excuse me, there is some additions, so there is a 4.1% increase in annual billing this year. That the state has allowed. There is some additional billing that they're allowing us to go after for patient refusal, stuff like that we do an assessment. Lift assist, stuff like that we're allowed to bill for now, which is different. We've never been able to do that before. We really can't predict what that's going to be. Just because, we have an idea, but it all depends on the insurance companies and such. It's still new, so we're not exactly sure what that extra will bring in. But there was a 4.1% increase from the state this year to what we can bill.
But you don't think it'll go down, so that's good.
Correct. No, and if our call numbers keep trending like they have the last month, it'll be a good year.
Okay.
And the other question I had, Christina, was kind of maybe for you or the whole group is, are we reasonably assured that over the 5 years, because Donna's done that analysis of how the Fund 17 will track, that that it's pretty comprehensive. We've got the things that are likely to come at us in the next 5 years, or does it get kind of spotty on what we have in the plan in the
Well, let's look at the what it is. Donna's there. So basically, what are we talking about here, Donna, of paying for in the next 5 years? And when?
Okay, so for next year, we're talking about paying for $80,000 for engineering for Wellington 1, $30,000 for driveway aprons at Wellington 1, a lease payment for the Ford Explorer at Wellington Hill. So here's the lease, a $75,000 purchase for a new vehicle, and the payment for that would be $12,160. The next thing is $25,000 to refurbish engine tank 1991. Okay, that's everything in the group.
And we we're assuming that the two big expenses, the radios that are a joint request, we can use ARPA funds for, and the SCBA air packs as well. But that's contingent upon the ARPA committee agreeing with that. If they don't, then we need to figure out another way to pay for it. So,
Christina, may I ask a question really quick?
sure.
Just about the ambulance, was that pushed out? Or is that just the hope that,
Yeah,
because the ambulance was requested for this year, at least being able to order. I don't expect, the last we've been told is it wouldn't get anything until the year after, but we need to be able to order it this year. And after with the Board of Finance, we did not replace the motor
right.
based off of our discussion. So we really need to be able to at least order that truck this upcoming budget year.
Like July.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna be a year or two, but we don't know where until we figure all of that out, we don't know where that payment's gonna be. My guess is it'll be 23, 24, but I don't know.
Yeah. So, and just for all the new people, what we do is if we lease a vehicle, typically we have one in the next year, we have one lease payment, and then because by the time it actually gets ordered and all that, there's just one. So usually the first year is half of what it normally is. So you'll see that with some of these other vehicles, that the first year is easy, and then the next year it doubles. And then it stays at that amount for the duration of the lease. So yeah, I don't even remember doing that, moving it, but yeah, we don't even have the lease figured out on that.
Well, is it right above it? No?
Yeah, it's the 48,000.
Oh, yeah.
48,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Could we
So I
put a
think-
placeholder in for 22, 23 for $1? Just showing that it will get approved in this coming year's plan, so we can go ahead and order it, knowing that the expenditure isn't gonna come out to 23, 24.
Yeah, I think we could do that. We could put in the 300 in this year as the lease and just have the first payment be in the next year.
You just
Yeah.
have to make sure it doesn't go into the math.
Yes, you're right, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And that won't impact anything we just talked about with Fund 17 because that money is actually coming out in the year that she already calculated. It's already part of that calculation. Right, Donna?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
I'm just going to move it up one cell because I don't want to disturb the formula.
Yeah,
So I think that that's going to be okay now.
okay. And is there anything else for that anyone sees that is missing or not in right? That at least for the EMS stuff? Anything anybody's wondering about? Okay. Donna, can you go up to Public Works?
Yes.
Because that's where, so you'll see all this stuff at the top that's bolded, that's already all committed from prior years. So we really start with the new dump truck, which was requested for this coming year. And we put it in as a full, not as a lease payment. Just to start because if we are going to do some sort of school project in a couple of years, we need to try to reduce these payments because they're and not keep adding to them. And we're going to need to pay for some stuff up ahead of time because those years are going to be difficult, the first couple. So so we thought we'd try it this way and it seemed like it sort of worked, using the reserve funds to just buy it outright. And also the excavator is in there like that. And what else did we do? We have the software in the drainage project. So
I think we should keep in mind, Christina, these drainage projects are only beginning pieces.
yeah,
Really, over the next, over the out years of this plan, it's likely we're gonna see more of those drainage projects. You know, the
more,
phases and stuff like that.
wait, you mean more on those roads or more on, like, this is phase one, but what about, is there a phase
Yeah,
three?
so if I understood,
I would say more on the Village Hill project. The
on the
idea
Village Hill,
is the Schofield go out beyond Public Works.
Erica, you're thinking Schofield won't happen in the next 5 years other than
No,
this?
I'm thinking it won't be Public Works, so it will be a much larger project.
Okay,
That it's going to be, I believe that may be a beyond.
it
Public
have
Works
to be
project.
something that goes into a bonding plan.
Yes, and
But
then
regardless, it's gonna come back into paying for it somehow. In this 5 years, probably.
Yeah,
It's gonna add to our bonding load.
yeah. And Donna, you want to just look at the school bond? I'll just show it to everybody. And then
Sure.
we can start from there because it's what Donna and I decided to do today as an example is the you look at line number 71. that's, we called it a construction project estimate, details to be determined. But basically, we put in a placeholder of $18 million as a bond anticipation note, which is low, we think. 18 million is probably on the very low side of if we do a renovation or a new school. And depending on the reimbursement rates, I think the committee's looking at all different options and iterations of what it could be. So we just thought, let's just use a number that seems like it's real, you know, somewhat real, and see what happens. And what happens is, you know, we put it in as a bond anticipation note in 23, 24, and then the payments need to start in 24, 25, and they work out to be 1.4 million a year. And 1.4 million a year just like blows up the plan. So, which is, I think, why we need to look at it and think about it and plan for that. Because I think, you know, it could be pushed out a year or two or whatever is going to happen. We don't know, but it's coming. It's a train that's coming. And what it does is, if you look at the local funds in 23, 24, it's at 780, and then it jumps to 2.5 million. And just for a good estimate that we've used over the years, and it might not be completely accurate right now, but 400,000 to 500,000 is a 1 mil increase. So 400 to 500,000 increase to the local budget, it leads to that. So we're looking at a pretty big bump up in one single year. So I think our options are.
Christina, if I remember, I'm digging this from memory last year, but I think based on the average house values previous to this spike in values, I think we estimated that a mill then equated to somewhere between 260 and 300.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was
per house, based on the average houses, but that, you know, that number is probably volatile right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially with reval and everything else.
23 will be a reval year, just to add to it.
So can you do that math, Christina? So would we be talking about 2-3 mil increase? Is that
well, if it's 300,000, we're talking here, I'll do it. A lot more than a couple, let's say. Minus 780.
Anna, can you scroll up to the top of this chart, please? Thank you.
Okay, do math. Let's see, 20.
Thank you.
I'm not sure what the mill increase would be.
No, ideally with both one or of the two of those projects, then those school projects would go away. So it would free up some dollars.
Right.
In the
Yes,
plan, not $1 million but
right.
some significant dollars. And I think at least for 5+ years, we should be looking at no real significant school projects, I would hope, if we build a new school.
Yeah.
Or if we renovate to new, even if we renovate to new, I would hope that you're getting a new product and we wouldn't be having any of these projects showing for a 5-6 year, maybe even.
Yeah, then again, looking, I hate to be the party pooper, but looking at it as a planning tool, if the school project leads to one or both of the current buildings not being used as a school anymore, which seems likely that at least one will not be used anymore, then someone's looking for some money to figure out what to do with the school that got left behind. So that's not a number we're seeing in the plan, but it should be something we're thinking about is coming within 5 years.
Right.
Right.
If we could find a revenue base for one or both of those buildings, depending on the use, would really help this whole process.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the past, we've always put this project sort of at the very last year and just sort of didn't worry about it, but I think the time's come where we can't do that anymore.
The can has reached the end of the road.
Yeah, yeah, and this, so I guess to me, the options are to try to bump up the next couple of years even more in the local spending, knowing that it could mean a tax increase now, but it would make the jump not as drastic in that third year. And it could make it's possible to do some of these projects before that hit. Or we could just try to stock away some money in the reserve fund to help offset that in that year. And I don't have a preference or for either.
Well, one of the elements that I think is ARPA, because that's an influx that, that we really weren't counting on and that we can't count on in perpetuity. So that at the same time that we're talking about this dynamic, that spending will sharply cut off.
Mhm.
And it's a lot of money, but in a short term. So,
Right.
I'm thinking that's something that would, affect this formula. I don't, in other words, I think we shouldn't get real used to, that additional spending and what the impact of that additional spending creates in spending. Like, for instance, we've talked before, but about the second ambulance or some of the stuff that we're talking that ARPA is going to be considering that has future expense, at least in insurance and repairs and maintenance and things like that. Insurance is a pretty big nut, and I really haven't heard a number on that for things like all the backup vehicles in public works and with the second ambulance idea. I would think it might be kind of costly if we're going to use them, but maybe not. Maybe there's a low mileage rate for the backups.
Donna, have you seen a significant increase with the fleet as it stands?
No, not in
Public Works?
Public Works.
Well, that is, as much as we pick on the new equipment for Troy, that is one of the values. And one of the reasons he's been asking for new equipment is to cut down on repairs.
Mhm. And this might be an opportunity, and I recognize, excuse me, that we're talking about two different groups of people and spending these dollars, but some of these things that are one-time projects, ARPA is the opportunity for us to, really almost reset our CIP plan with that influx of dollars, whether it be some of the road work or some of the other projects. It gives us the opportunity to spend those dollars there as we plan for socking some dollars away. It is a finite amount of time. It has to be allocated by December 31st, 2024. And then you have till December 31st, 2026 to actually spend it.
Mhm.
So if a project lingered longer and it took you longer to spend, what I'm not sure about, and I'm waiting to get the question answered, is if that were attached to any kind of salary piece.
Good point.
I think Jen has her hand raised.
Oh, Jen. I don't have anything.
Thanks. I'm just wondering how much there is in the ARPA budget, and because I've heard it talked about in quite a few meetings, and I'm just wondering how much there is to look at there.
1.7 million.
It's just over 1.7 million and we've committed 123,500 of that already.
Okay.
And in this plan, like if they were to agree with what we, have on here, that's just in year one, another 473,000, and then we got another 500 coming out of it next year, which I think we could probably add more things to it if easily.
It's amazing how fast you can use up $1.7 million.
Kidding.
Because this doesn't talk about any of the small business or individual
Right.
help that we've talked about.
Sure,
Right.
or requests that might go directly to ARPA without coming through us in any way.
Yeah. Yep.
This is really a great document that you guys have you've gotten this in really different shape as far as context and what all it shows.
Oh, thanks.
It's a living document.
Yeah. It's been alive for a very long time.
I know.
actually.
The fingernails are getting really long, huh?
Yeah, no, it's funny because we like unhid a lot of all the old columns and stuff, and it goes back many years of data. But like one of the things that would fall into the category that you just described is the used ambulance. So if Wellington 1 gets a new used ambulance, it's not really on this plan because it would happen in this fiscal year, and they would go to the ARPA commission, so it's not really even here anywhere. And there's probably a few other things we don't even know yet what people are going to be asking for, but yeah, so that's probably going to go fast, is my guess. Just looking at some of these things, and then also thinking about what isn't on this plan. Like, I don't think it's realistic to think that we're not going to be buying any more public works, other than replacing the sweeper, or like something at the transfer station, or things at the fire departments. I mean, it's really heavy on the things that we need in the next couple of years, and it's hard to predict like 5 years from now what we're going to need, but we don't have a lot of things on here for those years. So when those years come, those things will get added in, which is sort of the point of doing this now, but that's how it goes. So yeah.
So does that mean we need to ask people to, like all the departments to get pretty serious about looking at those out years?
Yeah, I mean, because I think the message is those out years are going to be super lean, and if something important is anywhere on someone's horizon, they should make it be
You're
known.
the guy with the gun, the person who'd do anything to protect the world.
So can I ask a question? So we talk about those out years being really lean, but we've put front end money on engineering and design for 2 fire departments, either renovations or a new build that we haven't even considered, right? That Wellington Hills asked for a new building, but it wasn't something on the radar. And significant road projects. I don't want to see us put all this money into them and then not do them again. So there's nothing more frustrating, I think, for everybody involved than when we do studies or engineering and then it just sits by the wayside. So those are huge investments
Mhm.
in just this 5-year plan.
Yeah, and Donna did work out the Wellington 1 fire state, the $2.9 million project, which works out to be a $275,000 bond payment, roughly, in the last couple of years. And yeah, Wellington Hills was just the surveying and architecture was in next year, and then what was the other thing? The design and engineering was in 24, 25. But it's in there right now. All of it's in there. But the question is this what we want to bring to the Board of Finance? And if we do, will
Christina.
the Board of Finance want to bring this to the taxpayers? So,
Christine, I think Stu's got his hand up.
oh, I can't see everybody. Hold, Stu?
There you go. Regarding the out years, and this goes past 5 years, an example being on a FEMA grant, we got an air compressor for filling the SCBA tanks. And at that time, about 8-10 years ago, it was about $42,000. At some point, that asset is going to be unrepairable or unreliable or both. And likelihood of getting FEMA to pay for a second one is pretty low, but it's not within the 5 years. And we could probably, every department could look around and say, okay, outside of the 5 years, we at least know some major, apparatus and trucks are getting older. And, Troy talked about his 10-year plan for replacing trucks. For some of these major things, we could probably make a long-term plan that goes out, at least 10 years, if not 15, to get some of the big items lined up. So at least, they're coming.
Agree.
Yeah, I think a couple of us have talked about that. I think Stuart's very correct about that, especially if we're looking at, I'm assuming that you did the payments for the school bond on a 20-year, or was that a longer term?
We did it on 30 years.
On 30. So there's a significant load on capital or on debt retirement for the next 30 years, those school payments. And so that it really drives the need for long range planning longer than 5 years.
Mhm.
We've been talking about the library payment for almost 20 years now, which will be soon. But that was a challenge when that bond was taken, and a lot of projects were put off at that point, and people were told, come back and see us when the library is paid for. By the time the library is paid for, we'll be paying for a school.
Mhm. Yeah.
And then the scores really change. It'll be more than, what is that, 177 a year that we pay on the library bond? Something like
Yeah, it goes down each year.
Does that end in this plan, Donna?
26, 27 is the final payment.
Okay,
Yeah.
so this is the last 5-year plan where we have that payment every year.
Mhm.
Some positive.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question as a novice who doesn't know anything about bonds and stuff? You had talked about the 18 million for the school, just as a kind of a ballpark number. And then looking at the years following, it would be 1.4 million a year for the payment.
Mhm.
So is it front loaded at that point and then it goes down? If it's a 30-year bond, what is the impact on it as it goes down?
Donna, you can explain it better. She was just looking at the table. with the
Yes.
principal and the interest and all that.
Yes, so the principal is the same. The interest goes down each year as the years go on.
So starting off would be the highest 1.4 is like roughly what you were
Yes.
just with the numbers that you had, and then it would go down from there. So how long would you anticipate it would be that significant a payment?
Well,
When
it
I-
doesn't go down much.
Yeah, I'm thinking the last payment at 30 years out is just a little under $1 million, right? It's like
Hold on,
something.
I have I have it.
Would hope not on an $18 million loan.
Well, you're paying probably almost double again on interest.
And that's including any money that we would get from the state for it. I mean, that's
The
Yeah.
2019 estimate was $45 million for the school. So using those numbers, and the then number from reimbursement was somewhere around 23 million. So, and that really depends on what you end up putting in the school, whether we do a renovate to new or a new school.
Yeah, so that's why we think 18 is probably on the low side. It's definitely not on a high side, unfortunately.
So I'm just trying to understand this. So the payment every year would be, I keep saying 1.4 because that's the number that was in the budget, but so that is like twice the capital that we typically would spend.
Yes. And that's
How's
after
that?
it ramping up our capital over just the last couple of years.
Right.
So yeah. So it's a pretty big jump.
So we'd really see that mill increase in the first couple of years, and then it would level off.
Yeah.
One would hope if we could see some economic growth, we could see some grand list improvement.
Mm-hmm.
I know Melissa had her hand up a couple times.
Yeah, Melissa, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I have to say too, that spreadsheet that you and Donna, it made it a lot easier to understand. You know, with the color coded and stuff, as well as, you know, it seems, you know, just watching CIP over the last couple of years, you know, I've learned a lot, but not necessarily everything I need to know for it. But is it possible, I know that they've never had to do it really before, to ask, like what you guys were saying, each department to come up with a 10-year plan versus the 5-year, you know, or what they currently need, you know, so that we have it, you know, like each year that they're thinking that they might something be necessary, so that it is a little bit easier to plan, especially with all these, you know, like Erica mentioned, the road projects. I mean, if we're going to put money into something, you know, and the fire departments, we want to be able to like go ahead with the projects, you know, and do something and not waste money.
Yep.
I don't know what has happened in past years, if that's even possible to ask, you know, departments to.
Well, so what will happen, like once we are happy with the plan, or at least feel like the plan makes sense, we will send it to the selectmen, and the selectmen will use the numbers, and they're looking at some key numbers that they put into their operating budget, which then comes to the Board of Finance eventually. So by the time it gets there, it usually changes a little bit here and there, and also the groups involved, you know, do some more thinking and maybe bring some other things forward. And I think that's where it might behoove us to let them know right now that that they should start thinking about that, even for the discussions with the selectmen and with the Board of Finance, which is all going to be happening in the next 2 months. So I think that would be good. I mean, all that really matters for that's going to the town this year is this first year. Like, what are those numbers and how do those numbers impact the operating budget? And that is the only thing that the town actually votes on, that's binding. The rest of it is just part of the plan. But you know, the more information the CIP committee has and everyone has, the better, I think, as we're looking at all of this stuff. So
Donna, can you tell me what that number going to 930 was?
Yes.
I got the reserve fund, but
Okay, so
in year one.
It's a total of $709,500 is the impact on the selectmen's budget in year one. There it is, $709,500.
Which is like 50 or 60,000 more than it was last year. Right? Yeah, it was 645 last year.
Yes, that's right, 645.
Thank you.
Yep, here it is,
But didn't a
645.
lot of that get cut out?
No,
We didn't do cuts in that line?
Mm-mm.
Well, we were coming close to the end of CIP last year. We had it at 670. And I don't remember how we ended up at the last minute. We dropped it down to 645. I don't remember how that happened.
Okay. Sounds like a. So Eric, I think you've touched on this before, but the infrastructure money, does that ever get down to local town roads spending or not?
the Build Back Better
Yeah,
money. So a lot of it, we might see some of it. A lot of it is going to be in competitive grants. So we're still learning more. We've had several seminars of, higher overview look at it. I hope if we weren't a city that had public transportation, we'd be looking at more. If we can carve out some road and bridge money, we're certainly going to do our best to go after it. But a lot of that Build Back Better money was already committed dollars.
so that's when you talked about if we had a bus depot or something, if we had a bus stop
Sure.
kind of thing.
Mhm. And they have said repeatedly, there'll be competitive grants. So
Could we build a bus stop school fire station?
sure, let's do it. Innovation. Nothing's off the table, right?
Sounds like the center of activity to me.
We'll
Take
call
the
it
old Holland
regional.
Bank and put it all right there.
We'll call it regional. I think regional usually gets more attention.
Karen Ann
Can
has
I
her hand.
ask can I ask a question?
Sure.
I thought I knew what all these codes were, but then as Donna showed the spreadsheet, codes that I didn't know what they were started popping up. Can we look at the spreadsheet and you tell me exactly what each code for funding source means? Could you do
Sure.
that for me? Thank you.
Okay, Christina,
I have
are
to.
you gonna?
I can try. So 930 is the selectmen's budget. Basically, it's operating budget. It's a line item in the budget, and whatever this number is here is the number that goes into their budget. The 900 is bond repayment or lease repayment, as is 311. So that's all for like trucks and equipment. 311 is. And 4 is capital reserve. So that's money that's been reserved from prior years. And we can build that fund up or spend it down, depending on the year and what's happening. 2 is LoCIP, which is a grant we get from the state, and we get a certain amount every year. And so we try to, and it's around $50,000. So we try to
Christina,
put,
sorry to interrupt. Is it true that everything you said before 02 is all directly from taxation, right? 930, 04, and 311 or whatever it was?
yes,
Okay, so those affect what we're taxing the people starting July 1.
yes,
Yep.
correct.
Okay.
That's a good way to look at it.
And then that's different for the rest of these, right?
Right, so ARPA is the money we're getting from the federal government. 17 is the emergency services fund that is basically built up through the ambulance billing. And we use it for fire department stuff. And what else? What else do we have in that year? Was there another one that you specifically weren't sure about, Karen Ann?
So somewhere I wrote down 504. Did I misunderstand that there?
There's an 04.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I
see,
know
but-
there's an
That's
04.
There it is.
That's capital reserve.
There it is.
Yeah, Donna, and
Yeah, okay.
L3.
Thank you. It's just, I thought I knew what most of these were. I just needed to double check. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Oh, that's a good thing to do.
Madam Chair, I have to go off the call right now.
Oh, okay.
Thanks, I told you about that.
Yep, yep. Thanks, Steph. I'm
My
sure
staff.
you'll have thoughts. So I don't know, what's everyone's pleasure? How do you guys want to proceed?
I'm
Erica, what do you want to do?
looking, I'm just trying to, think about where we're at in the direct impact in dollars this year. Do we think that pavement software could be used with LoCIP money? Apologize, I'm looking in the website now.
I always feel like LoCIP needs to be like actual,
Right.
like hard
I
things.
think so, but I'm not positive. All right, I'll mute myself. You can continue on while I look.
I mean, we can
That thing
try to,
in the-
we can try to move some things out of the first year in order to bulk up the reserve. That's one option. But still, bulking up the reserve is still going to come out of your operating budget. So I don't know if you want to do that.
We've talked in the past in some meetings about TAR funds, town aid roads and bridges or something like that. Is that still a thing?
That's worked into the general revenue.
Okay, so that's already baked into the budget.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, some towns will put it specifically to those. We use it to just offset in general. So
Mhm.
in some towns you take that money and if you got 300, you have $300,000.
Okay,
I don't disagree is a bad way, but it's baked into the revenue portion.
got it.
I haven't seen any of the operating budgets yet. Except for what Mike actually had just sent the Board of Finance members. Some of the early budgets that we're going to be seeing on Thursday, which are pretty much all the smaller ones that don't really impact things. So I'm not sure what we're looking at in terms like how this all fits into the big picture. If it's going to be a good year. I know, I think, Erica, you said that Region 19 is at least going to be good. To the good for us.
Well, I say that, but this is very rough estimate is looking at about a 3% increase for us compared to last. So a 3% over last year, which was already significantly higher. So we're not in the 9 and 10% increase, but it does not look like a decrease now. But again, that's a rough estimate. They're looking at their revenue costs first. So I don't.
So our
see
share
there, I
is
can say
going
the
down.
selectmen is high. Our share is,
Going down, but the overall budget cost is going up. So our net is still, even though we're paying less.
mhm. And then right now the selectmen's budget, we're currently working sits at 15%. I'm not saying that's what we're going with, but it's starting pretty high and it does not reflect these real numbers. They were,
Right.
they
Yeah,
were
well,
projections based on last year's plan.
oh, okay. Yeah.
I would guess, Christina, that I don't know that we have much choice but to leave it where it is for the moment. At
Yeah.
least at least go a little further on, try to figure out a little more with the out years and try to start pulling the plan together as much as we can. I'm not sure that we can cut a lot more out of year one, because all that's going to do is push the load further into the years 2 through 5.
Right.
They have a problem there.
Mm-hmm.
I think what's going to end up happening is if it turns out that this is just too big for the overall budget, then during the budget process, some may have to get changed.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's,
see what when we start working with Donna's other magic spreadsheet and seeing what the impact is on the taxes. And you know, we start gauging the appetite from the public on how much that's going to change the taxes. That may change what we're doing here.
right. Yes, this is an iterative process. So,
Well, based on 2 years ago, when we had brought up the yellow box number to, I think we brought it up to something like 680 or 690 right before the pandemic. And then everything got flatlined because of the pandemic. This would follow and actually be slightly less than the pattern we were going for at that time. We were
Yep.
going for that expansion, and that was 2 budget seasons ago.
mm-hmm.
At
Yep.
683 or 690. So if we followed that pattern, we'd be even higher than this 704 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, these are significant costs. You know, Christina, you lived and breathed this for many years. As we put off and deferred large projects and maintenance things, eventually it all comes to a head and we have to address it. And I think that's where we're seeing we have to put new dollars into things.
And escalation,
and scraping the bottom.
escalation gets you too, because not only do you have, but you're doing them at more and more expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
When you're lucky enough to get them.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Well, I think, as far as the progress Donna has made, so you guys saw the one table where she did the analysis on Fund 17. She needs to do that for the reserve fund and for low SIP and the others as well, just to make sure that at least the way we have it now is actually possible. So there might be some tweaking to do if it's not, but otherwise, I think we're on track to have a plan. It's just, is it a plan that everyone can live with?
And I think
And sell.
the key factor to this plan is what happens at the school building committee and a potential referendum.
Yes.
Like what direction the town moves in, either leaves that on our plan or takes it off the plan altogether. And those small projects are what stay on the plan, and we have 2 schools.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what happens in the coming months there is going to make a big difference for us.
Mhm. Yeah, so we have, I guess there's three possible outcomes for the schools. It's either we keep the 2 we have, and all those many lines of things are going to need to get paid for and done over the next 5 years, or you build as new one school, shutter the other, or find a reuse for it, or build a whole new school, then have 2 buildings to figure out what to do with. But I guess that's why that's why we just wanted to put in a number that seemed like it made sense. I'm totally open to changing that number. If somebody thought that it's too low or had a rationale for maybe why it should be low, that we should be looking at it lower. I don't know. How do you all feel about the 18 million as a proxy?
I think it's a little low simply because the number that we had was based on 2019 numbers. So I think that already that was looking at about 23 million, if my memory serves, was probably closer to reality. And that was with, no frills, just basic And I think that was based on a new build. There'll be some fluctuation if there's a renovate to new, and I don't know, what that will look like at all. But I think 18 is, I think it's too low.
Yeah,
So Christina, how many more meetings do we have for CIP?
we have one next week. Oh, shoot, I printed that out. No, we have one next week, and I think the week after. I think there's two more.
So we don't have to finish the out years tonight, obviously, but should we try to dig at them a little bit more, or do you want to try to get a sign off on year one?
Well, I guess if we had a sign up on year one, we could potentially talk, well, we can talk about it anyway, at Board of Finance on Thursday, just to give everyone a heads up about it.
I think one of the things we haven't done is we've only taken really one thing off the plan and said, we're not going to do this, and that's the bucket truck. So, are we comfortable saying everything else is going to stay on the plan in some way, shape, or form? I mean, we could start with that. I mean, do we see anything where we think it's just not doable and it can't stay on the plan?
I mean,
And I'm offering no suggestion, but I think everything is needed.
yeah, I mean, the dump trucks, I guess if I was gonna move anything, I would move the dump truck for next year to be the year after, only because that does set us up with a every 2-year thing. We got one 2 years ago, got one this year, and then we'll have one. And then it'll be a true every 2 years thing after that. But I understand the issue there.
And that particular truck has been costly lately, simply because of the nature of the truck. But I think Troy thought he could get we trading it in, so hopefully bring this cost down significantly.
Yeah, and then I did wonder about the excavator. We had talked about that last year, and whether or not it just makes more sense to rent one. And then there's also the project for Village Hill that would, I guess, I don't know if that $60,000 for that phase 2 of Village Hill includes having the excavator, or if that includes renting an excavator. So maybe that number would change.
That, Troy, correct me if I'm wrong, that number did not include renting an excavator. There was increase in costs, correct? Is he still on?
He's coming.
Oh, there he is.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, no, that didn't include the rental. That was just the cost of the pipe and everything that went up significant, the plastic pipe, the catch basins, all that. So it did not include the rental piece of it. Is there, like, this might sound like a stupid question, but what about those funds, those ARP funds that to use that for a dump truck, use that for the excavator? Can that be used as like a revenue loss, or is that completely off the board?
Based on what Erica said, I don't think that we are precluded from using it for that.
No.
Because I mean, there's a few things, I mean, in that, obviously we have that meeting on next Monday, but I mean, I was going to suggest that some of these things like the ambulance, the dump truck, all that stuff, if we have that money available, we're using, that 300,000 for an ambulance, 225,000 for that. I mean, use that for those instead of, and taking it out of CIP, and it might alleviate some of these issues over here.
So one of the things, so Christina, if we take dollars in revenue loss, it can be used on any municipal expenditure. So anything that we would normally budget and spend on the municipal side. So in my mind, that's anything on CIP, right? These are all our typical expenses. And to Troy's point, I think you have that dump truck coming out of the reserve, so there wouldn't be a lease, because what we can't use it on is anything that we've committed any prior debt. We cannot use it to pay down debt. So if we can use it to prevent debt going into a couple of bonds, it may be a positive use of those funds for us, but we can't use it for anything once we commit to a lease. So like the trucks that we just purchased.
And
We
would
now-
that make a huge difference if you took the 225 and the 80,000 for the excavator, like out of that and just say we did use those funds for that? I mean, would this make a huge difference in year one?
It would, but it would also make a huge difference in the ARPA funds, which will reduce those by over $300,000, which doesn't sound like a lot when you think of 1.7 million, but we already have a bunch of things that people are asking for. So, I mean, I don't know. We just don't know. And I don't know how that committee is going to feel about any of this either. So I guess, I don't know.
I mean, somewhere somebody's got to give a little, somewhere it's got to, either the ARP committee has got to give, or, you know what I mean? If that's where you're taking large ticket items and taking them off, you're saving basically taxpayers' dollars with those big ticket items versus trying to.
Well, it's the way I look at it, it's just different pockets. And so you're either taking it out of this pocket or that pocket, but either way, the taxpayers are, they don't have to pay for $1.7 million worth of something over the next few years, but what those somethings are, I don't think they're going to care about. So it depends on what makes the most sense for the planning purposes and for the, just what those emergency things are that people are going to be asking for. I don't know, Erica, you probably have a better idea of like what sorts of things are going to be coming at that committee, but
the things that I've talked about with the fire departments are on here, right? The radios, the SCBA packs. I know there's been discussion about that second ambulance. There's some Wi-Fi increases and technology and increases within the town hall that I want to bring to you. But I wouldn't say that many other significant things. And then our human services department would probably like to see some funding there. I'm going to suggest sharing a portion of some salary changes in that department. Obviously, they are only for a short period of time, and we'd ramp those up into the operating budget because we'd have to take them over. Those were long-term. But the best use of these dollars is short-term one-time purchases so that we're not committing ourselves to $1.7 million year over year.
right.
Maybe a hybrid of what Troy's talking about and what Christina's talking about is split it. So push the dump truck out 1 year, and that does the 2 year thing, and takes some off of this plan for that lease payment, and suggest that the excavator goes to ARPA. That way you're not putting 225,000 onto ARPA.
Right, and this plan has it in reserve, so it's never going to leases, right? If I'm reading this right.
Right.
Well,
Right.
it does
Doesn't-
show lease
No,
7 years at 4%.
that's next
I
to
don't
it,
know.
but that's next to
Yeah.
it, but that's not what they have in the
Right.
plan. They have the fund sources 04.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're gonna pay, so that whole 225 and the whole 79, we're gonna come out in this
Yeah.
Right.
year. Okay.
And
Oh, so
I
that
would
would make a
really,
huge difference.
Yeah. If we put those to leases, it'll make a big difference in year one, but it's not.
I don't want to see them go to leases, I think, and I definitely wouldn't want to see us put that dump truck off because that dump truck is costing us money, but that may be a good use of, I think to Troy's point, if we take it off and use ARPA funds to pay for it, we're lessening the impact this year on the capital. It's just a thought.
Mhm.
Yeah,
We can also use ARPA next year too. Right. Oh, Melissa, you have your hand up.
Yeah, can you, for the dump truck and the excavator, can you use like half ARPA funds and then half CIP? for the first year, for this year.
Interesting.
You know, just like what Eric was saying with, you know, at her meeting on whatever, I don't even know what day it is today. Yesterday, I think it was, you know, not spending all of, you know, asking from ARPA the whole amount of what she's looking for the staffing changes, you know, just 3/4 of it, you know, asking, and then, you know, you doing the rest. So the same type scenario. That way it's not such a big chunk out of the CIP, and it's still getting what we need.
I don't have an answer to that, but I just wrote that down, Melissa, to reach out to the CCM ARPA advisory group
Okay.
to get their feedback on that.
That's a good.
It's a good
Way to look
suggestion.
at it.
So I'm curious what that, changing those two to ARPA, what that did to the yellow box number, which I'm guessing is what Donna's working on right now.
Yeah. Donna, you're, here we go.
Okay, so because it's off budget, it doesn't change the yellow box. But it,
Because it was coming out of capital reserve.
yes, which is off budget, and now it's ARPA, which is still off budget. It's
Okay, and
just,
the difference, but what the benefit to the taxpayer is, we just put a lot of money back in capital reserve.
Right.
yes,
Because we're putting 345,923 into the reserve in this.
Right, which
year.
is from taxation.
Correct.
Right, so that changes, either it means we're building up capital reserve, or that 345 number can go down and affect taxation.
Karen Ann, you have a question?
Yeah, what exactly do we have for ARPA now? We've got the radios, we've got the air packs. Now you're talking about adding the dump truck and the excavator. What else is on here for ARPA?
So if I look at these numbers correctly, the plan when Christina presented it had 473,000 and then 500,000 in year 2 for 973. That left roughly 800,000, of which we've committed 123. So that would leave just under 700,000. Now, if you add in another 245, what was the excavator?
79.
79. It got
304.
no, it's gotta be more than 304.
Yeah,
Close to 320. So that leaves you about $300,000 not committed just from CIP. And that's if we went with everything that was in year 2 in ARPA, and I don't know that I know what those things are.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would really eat up a lot of what's available in ARPA, is what we're saying, if we tried to put all of this in ARPA.
Well, so for instance, I can see right there, the $500,000 in year 2 in ARPA is a school project. It's ventilation in the hall school West Wing. If we know we're going with the school project, that $500,000 is gone.
Yeah.
Okay. I just keep seeing more and more things being added to ARPA and wondering if we're gonna run out of money. As Mike said earlier, $1.7 million can go really fast.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yep.
At what point do we kind of synthesize what we are talking about here with the ARPA committee?
Well, I haven't, I got appointed.
you did.
So I'm probably going to be the chair of that when they meet. I don't know if they're going to still want to do that, but I wasn't officially appointed yet, so they couldn't vote on at the last meeting, but I can certainly share the perspective of the CIP committee with the ARPA committee. And I can also, as the CIP chair, bring the bring all of this to the Board of Finance. So there's sort of like a triangulation there of just a lot of people who need to kind of get on board with whatever the decisions are. So.
And Jen, just for a little bit more perspective, there are 4 members of this. I'm sorry. 1, 2, 3 members and Troy. So 4 people who are on this call sit on the ARPA commission. And then 3 members of Board of Finance are on this particular committee, the CIP committee. So there's overlap for both of those where, members are hearing the conversation on both ends, so can speak to it when Christina brings it to the ARPA commission.
And how
We'll call
many,
it synergy.
how many other, okay, I have to ask it differently. So are there other committees, do we anticipate, that are sitting around talking about their budgets and saying this can go to ARPA as well? Because I'm just, as we are having this conversation, I can imagine other groups having the same conversation. So while we say this is the amount that would be committed to ARPA, maybe someone else has the same, like a number that they're anticipating as well. Is this kind of like the clearinghouse for all budgets?
This is the clearinghouse for all the big budgets, all the big ticket items that are, yeah. But yeah, we know
I can't
of
say
some of them.
library board tried to push a lot of things to ARPA that we were going to apply for. Yeah.
Yeah.
You did
So,
or you
yes,
did not,
we could-
Karen?
What?
Did you say you did or did not?
We did. When we were working on our budget, we said, well, let's see if we can put that to ARPA. Let's see if we can put that to ARPA. So there were some things that we took off of our budget to try and keep our budget reasonable, hoping that we could apply for ARPA funds.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yes,
and
this is
I
not the
think-
only committee.
Yeah, definitely not. And I think the ARPA commission hasn't even determined how we're going to award these, what the process is. It could be done very quickly, or it could get dragged out to the point where we wouldn't even be able to know with any surety that these things could be done in next fiscal year. Like if it gets dragged out, we're going to miss the window to get these things included in this plan. So we don't really know how it's going to go. We can only try.
So if moving those 2 trucks doesn't offset what we decide to bump up in the general reserve without any assurance of what ARPA will do, I think it's best to leave them in the plan as they were before. I know Donna changed them to ARPA, but I would leave them in 04 so that we have a committed source. And what that would do is at any time if ARP use them, we wouldn't take them from the general reserve fund, and it would leave more funds in the future years projects.
Mhm.
So you're saying still apply for ARPA, but leave it funded here for now?
I think so. I mean, I think there are things that are needed, and because we don't know, right? We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what the process is going to be there. And it's, we're talking about an 11-member commission who wants to make sure we get public input at the same time. Some things seem pretty obvious to me. Those emergency response items seem without a doubt to me, good use of funds
Yeah.
without waiting too long. After that, I think it needs some thought, and I think it needs some public input.
And I think too, with the trucks, now that I'm thinking about it, like if our plan is to get one every other year or have an actual, like schedule that we're following, then the ARPA funds isn't the place for it, because it's just setting up a unsustainable hole. There would be a hole in the next year.
Well, that might be better on the excavator, because the excavator is more of a unique expense. That's not a
Right.
on-year cycle necessarily.
Yeah,
I would agree, Mike.
agree. Yeah.
And this plan had it paying for it outright so that we're not adding to our debt.
Right.
So it's a solid plan. I think Troy's suggestion was a way to save some money on the current operating budget. But if we're going to put that money into the reserve, we didn't really take any dollars down. But I'd rather we plan for it and then not.
I see Phil has joined us. Hi, Phil.
Hello, I'm meeting hopping. My budget meeting is over, so now I'm here. Sorry.
Great. Well, welcome. One thing that I wanted was hoping you would be able to be here to hear about is Donna and I, when we were putting together the out years, we put in a proxy number for a school construction project of $18 million, which we think is a very low number. And Erica thinks it's probably maybe should be 23 million. And there's probably lots of other opinions of what it should be, but we know it probably shouldn't be less than 18 million. So knowing that, what it ends up doing is creating a bond payment of $1.4 million in the out years. So now we're just trying to figure out how to mitigate that. So
Private donors.
that'd be great.
But Phil, what do you feel about 18 million? I think Christina and Donna were looking at trying to get a realistic number in there. And I just felt, well, I think it's exactly the right thing to do. I'm nervous that number is too low because the numbers we use are based on 2019 assumptions.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, all you're doing, it's not I hate to say this, but it's not a real number.
No.
You've got a placeholder in there until you figure out, or the SBC figures out direction, and then there's a vote. Because that 18 million could be 0, it could be 30 million. I'm hoping that the school building committee will vote in an OPM, owner's project manager, tomorrow night. And if that's the case, I think it's a good question for them to say, how do you handle the capital improvement projects? What do you put in there for a number? And then what are your suggestions on trying to level out that bond payment? I think one of the things that's not reflective on that bond payment too, and Donna and I have talked about this, is there's a definite decrease in the operating budget on the Board of Ed side, and staffing of going to one building. Now, it's not, you don't see it every year, you see it one time. But I mean, I think it's a minimum of $500,000. So I would expect the Board of Ed budget side, operating budget side, to go down $500,000. That brings your bond payments into a different level. So I can't really comment on the 18 million. Yes, Eric, I think it's low, but it also depends on what you do. If the town, decides for a new school or a pre-K to 8 renovation. There's a lot of variables, but an OPM should be able to help identify that. And maybe soon enough that when do you have to have your approval by? When do you have to vote on your plan?
Well, the Board of Selectmen goes the first Thursday in March to Board of Finance. So we can back up from there. Our regular meeting would be like the 20th of February, somewhere right around there.
I mean, I would think if they vote on an OPM tomorrow night, I would think Donna, and I'd be glad to sit down with Donna and the OPM, just have a conversation about what's the number we put in there, what's a reasonable bond payment based upon, because they know what's out there right now. They're gonna have some real construction numbers and costs as of right now, and that is where it becomes real. Whether it's a renovation or a new building, they're going to know cost of materials, things like that. And that should give you enough time, or hopefully enough information, to be able to make an accurate statement on your plan.
Okay, that's great timing then.
Almost they approve it.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm not a voter.
The other thing I'd ask you to ask them is the timing, because you walked us through that last time. And I think that we have it reflected in the plan, like if things worked that way, the soonest it could work, but if you could just double check that'd be good.
Absolutely. Yep, for sure. Where does it fall? What year? And Donna and I have talked about this. When do you actually need your money? Is it when the project is done, or is it when they start? Do you have to put a down payment down? What's it look like? And so the OPM will help us with all those answers and the various timelines that exist.
Okay, great. Perfect
I
timing.
think we'd need a construction loan before all of that, right?
Depends on if it's in the bond. I
Right.
don't know.
So do we, if I heard you right, Christina, as year one sits, we can afford everything that's in there within year one, or do we only know Fund 17?
We only know Fund 17, but we have a good guess that the others are okay, because we didn't go crazy with them. Is that right, Donna?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
Christina's right.
Yeah, we think they're,
Yep.
they're not like perfectly dialed in, but they're close. They're fine. So yes, they can be afforded. It's just, it really comes down to your budget and your 930 number and your 311 number and your
Mhm.
04 number. So. And then what everything else is in there too, what everyone's comfortable with, so. So yeah, I think for now, I think we can say year one is good, but we have a lot of to-dos. One is for me to bring what we have in there to the ARPA Commission on Monday. And just see if we can get some feedback from them and understand where to go next.
Thank you.
And
Does it make sense to suggest that maybe that's the next thing we should wait for?
yeah, I think so.
Because if you get a warm fuzzy feeling out of that versus a not good feeling out of that, then that could also change our out years too.
Right. Yeah, the thing with ARPA is we could have things that aren't related to CIP like we just talked about that have that weren't on anyone's radar. So that's got to be taken into account. I think the committee has to that's put one of the things to think about is this something that we want because there's some money, or is it something that has been a need for a while and we're going to solve a problem with it? So that's all to be determined in the next month. So should we does everyone want to just wait until next week to maybe make a vote on year one and send that to the selectmen? And
We'll need to see that spreadsheet for the fund balances updated, I think, to get everybody
Yeah.
comfortable with that.
yeah, I think Donna's close, so maybe in the next day or two.
Donna, can you plug those numbers into the selectmen's budget so that I can start to see that in true?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Does anybody have any questions or anything else they want to mention or ask? No? Okay. Well, then I think we can adjourn if there's nothing else. And okay,
I'll second.
great. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Right.
Christina.
Thanks, Donna.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Aye.